Break. The new president of the Southern Baptist Convention's public policy organization says the Bible Belt is collapsing. The Reverend Russell Moore says Bible-believing Christians increasingly will be forced to choose whether they will follow God or the nation's leaders.
Pastor Mike Henderson walked into his church on a Sunday morning in 2019. 12 people sat scattered across pews built for 800. 20 years ago, this same room was packed wall to wall. The parking lot needed traffic cops. Now, just echoes. Within months, the doors would close forever. Henderson's church wasn't unique. Across the Bible Belt, thousands of churches are vanishing, and it's happening 3 times faster than experts predicted. What's killing the most religious region in America? Henderson didn't know it yet, but his church was about to become a statistic, one of thousands across the American South shuttering their doors in what researchers call the most dramatic religious transformation in U.S. history. The numbers are staggering. Since 2010, rural areas across the Bible Belt have experienced closure rates hitting 30%. Churches that anchored communities for over a century are disappearing faster than gas stations. But here's what makes this shocking. The Bible Belt was supposed to be different. In 1925, when journalists first coined the term, Sunday church attendance in Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee exceeded 80%. These weren't just places of worship. They were the centers of everything: politics, business, social life. When the pastor spoke, towns listened. For nearly a century, nothing changed that. The region weathered the civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, the rise of secular culture in coastal cities. Sociologists believed the South's religious identity was so deeply rooted, it would prove immune to secularization trends affecting the rest of America. They were catastrophically wrong. Sarah Martinez saw it firsthand. After 15 years in Chicago, she returned to her hometown of Clarksdale, Mississippi, in 2018. The church where she was baptized, where her parents married, where her grandmother's funeral was held, was for sale. The sign read, "Perfect for event venue or storage facility." She cried right there in the parking lot. Her story is repeating across thousands of communities. Drive through any small southern town today, and you'll see what locals call church graveyards. Baptist, Methodist, and Pentecostal buildings standing empty. Steeples still reaching skyward. Parking lots reclaimed by weeds. But what's actually driving this unprecedented collapse? The answer isn't simple. It's a perfect storm. And the first force hit harder than anyone expected. For decades, the Bible Belt's religious culture was protected by something simple. People stayed put. You were born, raised, and died in the same town where your family had worshipped for generations. That stability reinforced everything: social pressure, community ties, shared values. The 1990s shattered that stability. Economic opportunities began pulling millions of Southern-born residents toward cities. Atlanta, Austin, Charlotte. These cities were technically Southern, but they developed cultures more similar to Boston or San Francisco than rural Alabama. And here's the twist. These same cities started attracting millions of migrants from the Northeast and West Coast, people bringing dramatically different attitudes about religion. The result? Cultural dilution on steroids. Atlanta, once called the buckle of the Bible Belt, now has church attendance rates lower than Boston. Austin, Texas reports that over 40% of its residents identify as religiously unaffiliated, a percentage that would have been unthinkable in Texas just 1 generation ago. But it gets worse. Dr. Amanda Reynolds at Vanderbilt University has studied this for 20 years. Her research shows something shocking. Transplants to the South aren't adopting local religious practices. Instead, they're creating secular enclaves that gradually expand into previously religious communities. It's the reverse of what happened historically. Instead of Southern culture converting newcomers, secular culture is converting the South. The economic devastation amplified everything. Consider Millerville, South Carolina, a textile town of 3 to 200 people. In 2009, the local cotton mill closed. Within 5 years, 40% of the population left, chasing jobs in cities. The social fabric that sustained 3 generations of churchgoers simply evaporated. Of the town's 7 churches, 4 closed. The remaining 3 struggled to hold regular services. This pattern repeated across hundreds of towns. Traditional Southern industries, agriculture, textiles, small-scale manufacturing created tight-knit communities where everyone knew their neighbors. Social pressure to conform was intense. When those industries collapsed, so did the networks sustaining religious life. But the most devastating force wasn't economic. It was generational. Young people raised in religious households are leaving the faith at rates that have blindsided church leaders. And unlike previous generations, they're not coming back. The data is stark. Among Americans born before 1965, approximately 85% of those raised in the Bible Belt maintained religious affiliation throughout their lives. Among those born after 1990, that number dropped to 42%. More than half are walking away permanently. 22-year-old Marcus Thompson from rural Georgia represents this shift. Raised in a devout Baptist family, he stopped attending church at 18. Now, he describes himself as anti-religious. His explanation reveals everything. It wasn't just one thing. It was the hypocrisy I saw, the way the church handled politics, the way they treated LGBTQ people, but mostly, it was realizing I could be a good person without believing in God. The church wasn't helping me with real problems: student loans, finding a job, dealing with anxiety. I felt like I was being asked to solve spiritual problems that weren't really problems. Marcus isn't alone. Young people across the South are asking the same questions. And the churches don't have good answers. Technology accelerated everything. Social media and internet access broke down the geographic isolation that once protected religious communities. Young people in rural Mississippi now have the same access to diverse ideas as their peers in San Francisco. When pastors' interpretations of Scripture can be instantly compared with thousands of alternative viewpoints online, institutional religious authority crumbles. Dating apps transformed romantic relationships too. Young evangelicals increasingly form relationships with people outside their faith communities. Interfaith marriages have skyrocketed. These relationships often lead couples away from organized religion entirely, as they seek approaches that accommodate both partners. College education played a crucial role. Historically, the Bible Belt had lower college attendance rates. That educational gap actually reinforced religious culture by limiting exposure to secular ideas. As college attendance increased throughout the South, that protective barrier vanished. And here's what church leaders didn't see coming. The students didn't just become less observant. They became actively secular, expressing negative views toward organized religion that previous generations rarely held. But 2 events accelerated the collapse beyond anything demographics could predict. The first accelerator was political. Beginning in the 1980s, Southern churches became increasingly aligned with conservative political movements. Initially, this strategy worked. It gave churches political influence and mobilized congregations around shared values. But it created a fatal vulnerability. As American politics polarized, especially during the Trump era, many Southern churches faced an impossible choice: religious teachings or political loyalty. The contradiction fractured congregations from within. Younger evangelicals began questioning whether their churches cared more about political power than spiritual growth. When pastors who preached about loving neighbors appeared to prioritize political ideology over community welfare, it accelerated departures that were already happening. Then came COVID-19. The pandemic didn't just close churches temporarily. It revealed something church leaders never wanted to admit. Many congregants didn't miss organized worship as much as expected. Online services, initially seen as temporary substitutes, became permanent alternatives. Millions of believers discovered they preferred the convenience and personal control of digital worship. No traffic, no parking, no pressure to socialize. Faith on their own terms. But the real damage came from how churches handled the pandemic itself. When numerous prominent evangelical leaders resisted public health measures, it created a crisis of credibility. People watching pastors prioritize political ideology over community health began questioning everything else those pastors taught. The Southern Baptist Convention, once the undisputed religious powerhouse of the region, has lost over 2 million members since 2007. The steepest declines? In its traditional heartland states. Churches that once supported full-time pastors are consolidating or closing. Small congregations are merging just to survive, and every closure accelerates the cycle. As churches lose younger members, they become less financially viable and less culturally relevant, which drives more young people away. Some churches are trying radical departures from traditional evangelical culture. Contemporary music, casual dress codes, social media engagement, progressive theology, emphasizing social justice, and environmental stewardship. Reverend Patricia Williams transformed a struggling Methodist church in North Carolina using this approach, but she lost half her original members in the process. We had to choose between dying slowly with dignity or risking everything to stay relevant, she explains. The question is whether we can attract 2 new members for every one we lose. So far we can, but it's exhausting. Most churches can't pull off that transformation, and the consequences extend far beyond empty pews. For generations, religious institutions provided social services throughout the South. Community organization, informal social safety nets, mental health support. As these institutions weaken, communities are discovering massive gaps. In many small southern towns, pastors served as primary counselors for people dealing with depression, addiction, and family problems. The system had obvious limitations, but it provided accessible support for people who had nowhere else to turn. Now, those safety nets are vanishing. Mental health crises in rural southern communities are intensifying. Suicide rates climbing. Substance abuse problems spreading, and there's no secular infrastructure to fill the void. The political implications are equally profound. The Bible Belt's religious culture has been the backbone of conservative politics for 4 decades. As that culture weakens, the political landscape is shifting in ways that seemed impossible a generation ago. Georgia's transformation from reliably red to purple battleground directly correlates with declining religious influence in metro areas. Texas provides an even more dramatic example. Despite its conservative reputation, church attendance in major Texas cities has declined over 25% since 2010. Young Texas voters are increasingly secular and progressive. Republican dominance in what was once considered an unshakable conservative state is beginning to face real challenges. Family gatherings are becoming battlegrounds too. Parents who assumed their children would inherit their faith are discovering religious transmission is no longer automatic. Weddings, funerals, and holidays that once reinforced traditions now feature conflicts between devout grandparents, moderately religious parents, and secular young adults. The most dramatic changes are still ahead. Demographic projections suggest the transformation will continue accelerating over the next 2 decades. Current fertility patterns show secular families in the South having children at higher rates than religious families. Immigration to southern cities continues bringing religiously diverse populations that dilute evangelical influence. Spiritual but not religious has become the fastest-growing category throughout the South. People maintaining belief in God or higher power while rejecting organized religion entirely. The Bible Belt isn't becoming completely secular. It's becoming spiritually diverse in ways where traditional evangelical Christianity no longer dominates. Climate change may accelerate migration patterns favoring urban areas over rural religious strongholds. Younger evangelicals increasingly view environmental stewardship as a moral imperative, creating tensions with older members who prioritize economic concerns. Pastor Henderson's nearly empty sanctuary in Alabama isn't just the end of one church. It's a symbol of an entire way of life disappearing faster than anyone thought possible. The empty churches scattered across the former Bible Belt stand as monuments to something historians have known, but people always forget. Nothing lasts forever. Not even institutions that seemed permanent just a generation ago. The Bible Belt's collapse reveals a truth about modern America that extends far beyond religion. When underlying social conditions shift, cultural dominance can vanish with stunning speed. And right now, across thousands of communities throughout the American South, that transformation is happening in real time.